Good morning and many thanks for watching KTN News. My name is Danny Sasset and welcome to Inside Politics, the #1 premier political show in the country. As we take stock of the political landscape in the country, especially what made headlines this week and what to expect moving forward. In studio with me is Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst. Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate of the High Court, will be joining us a little bit later, and Hesbon Owila, communication and media expert. Remember that you can be part of this conversation on our socials. That is at KTN News KE, at Dennis Asset on Twitter. Our hashtag is Inside Politics. You can equally engage us live on our studio line. That is 0719-012-041, 0719-012-932, 0719-012-590. The numbers will be scrolling on the screen. Remember that you can be part of this show when you get that part of your call. Now, just what made headlines this week. You have less than 72 hours to sell your maize stock or you will be locked out. This is CS Moses Kuria ultimatum to maize farmers. This appears to be an about turn to an earlier statement that the government was to import over 10 million bags of maize. Kuria now says the cabinet is yet to decide on the matter. KTN's political affairs reporter Daniel Kariuki has more on the latest back and forth surrounding maize importation.
The thorny maize issue is slowly turning to be a hot potato that may leave the controversial Trade Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria on the receiving end. Kuria has now given an ultimatum to maize farmers.
Ikifika siku ya Jumanne tuko na mkutano ya baraza la mawaziri, nitapewa mwelekeo. Nikipewa mwelekeo tufumbulie, tutafumbulia. So mko na masaa karibu 72 ya kutoa mahindi kabla baraza la mawaziri likae chini.
Kuria has accused the farmers of hoarding the commodity, thereby causing shortage.
Nilisema juzi ati nitaleta, hata sijasaini kitu na mahindi mmeanza kutoa, endeleeni. Mimi nimefurahi. Mahindi muendelee, hiyo moyo muendelee kutoa mahindi.
Hii inaitwa Transoya. Moja Transoya inaitwa the bread basket of the Republic of Kenya. But we have the basket, we don't have the bread inside. Now you want to even steal the basket. Yote iende. Hapa penye huko waziri wakulima, hii ndio sasa nguvu zetu. Maize farming.
According to Kuria, should the farmers continue holding on to the maize, the cabinet's resolution will be to import maize. The CS claiming the resolution has not yet been reached. His latest statement seen as an about turn, having already said the government is going to import over 10 million bags of maize that would include the newly approved GMO maize.
Sio sisi tunataka kufanya vile tunafanya. Ni vile hatutaki hata mtu mmoja apoteze uhai kwa sababu ya njaa, kwa sababu tutalaumiwa na kizazi kilicho hapa, kizazi kijacho, na pia tutakuwa katika hatari ya kutoona Mungu na macho.
We want to capacity build our farmers. Lakini mkileta mimea zingine kutoka nje, mtakuwa mnaumiza wakulima wa Transoya. And we will no longer be called the bread basket of the Republic. Already land fragmentation imeanza kupoteza nguvu za hii Transoya.
The government has been on the spot over their plan to import GMO maize. The move splitting the political class down at the middle, with a section of MPs claiming farmers were already harvesting their maize. Kuria caused an uproar last week after claiming that GMO maize can also be added to the list of causes of death in Kenya. Focus shifts to the cabinet Tuesday. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News.
And that has also been covered in the dailies. As you go to today's Standard newspaper, the very first biggest headline is right here. Kuria gives farmers 72 hours to sell their maize. This seems to be a difference from what he had said earlier with regards to importing 10 million bags of maize. This has also been well covered inside the paper. If we just go inside to page number 9, that is an in-depth analysis of what CS Moses Kuria has said, his statements with regards to maize importation, as the government tries to make sure that food security is something that is attained in Ruto's government. The same has been covered as well in the Nation newspaper. That is in page 5. Kuria urges farmers to sell their maize. This is forming part of our conversation this morning as we just dissect on what position Kuria seems to be speaking from. Is it the government position? We just need to find out, and this goes straight to Dismas. Moses Kuria last week was saying it's a loose cannon. He's come up with a new statement. You must sell your maize within the next 72 hours. Is that the government position?
Well, I think we need to look at it from a global level and ask ourselves, what do Kenyans expect from the Kenya Kwanza administration? They expect food security, that food is available to all Kenyans and food is affordable to all Kenyans. So for consumers, they want to be guaranteed of availability and affordability. While on the other hand, for the farmers, they want to have the highest return on their investment. So there have been conversations that in fact a number of maize farmers have been holding maize, hoping that there's going to be, a crisis around the demand and supply, so that the prices can be significantly higher. And you see, when you engage in any commercial farming, at the end of the day, for you, your principal interest is to maximize the return on your investments. And I think now Moses Kuria has established that if indeed the farmers who are holding maize or maize products, how do you make sure that the same food is available and it's affordable to majority of Kenyans? It's by telling them that if you keep on holding these maize, then there's an opportunity for us to get maize from another part of the world. And again, we live in a globalization of markets and production. So Kenya is not the sole producer of maize. Maize is produced all over the world. And if a Kenyan consumer can get maize, say, from Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, from wherever it's coming from in the world, if it's if it's affordable and it's available and meets the nutritional value, the consumer will be very happy. So I think now for Moses Kuria, it's trying to create that delicate line between demand and supply to manage stakeholders' expectations, that the farmers are happy and the consumers are happy. But again, the farmers say that there's a certain threshold beyond which they cannot sell their maize because they're talking about the cost of production. So again, it's incumbent on the Kenya Kwanza administration to address the key issues around production. So if it's around fertilizer, if it's around seed, if it's around the diesel used for commercial farming, that must be addressed so that the Kenyan farmer remains competitive all over the world. But on average, for the consumer, majority of the consumers, they don't care whether the maize comes from Tanzania or from Rwanda or from Uganda. All they want is to have ugali when they need it. But for the farmer, they're saying, wait a minute, you promised us that you are going to make our business profitable. So the ball is now in the Kenya Kwanza administration's court.
Husband, when you talk about issues to do with maize, like rightfully put by Dismas, there is the issue of price. How am I supposed to sell my maize? Yeah, because remember, farmers are buying fertilizer at around 7,000 shillings. So then when it comes to selling it, how then do they make sure that they are getting the maximum profit? At the same time, the government is able to feed the people. And the statements by Moses Kuria, what does that say of the government? Because the government has not come out to say, this is our position with regards to maize that you're buying, maize that you're importing, and this is how much you're going to buy it for.
The cabinet secretary in charge of trade is essentially the main person as far as policy direction of the ministry is concerned. I mean, the reason why he was appointed the trade cabinet secretary is because he needs to champion conversations around that. So whether cabinet has met or not, I think whatever Moses Kuria is saying is probably the direction that cabinet is likely to take, because then that becomes the basis upon which they deliberate and panel beat, the policy statements that originate from the trade ministry. And I think to a large extent, Moses Kuria will always be evaluated on the basis of what we know Moses Kuria in the public domain. And now it's incumbent upon him now to transition from, a representative of the people to someone who shapes policies that affect the people. And I guess he has enough people around him, to shape that conversation, to ensure that everything he says in the public domain is looked at from a very strategic point of view in terms of what are the implications of this statement, how does it put the entire government in the eyes of Kenyans, and how then does it, resonate with Kenyans who want cheap unga on the shelves, and farmers who want to reap as much as they can from their produce. But I think, having said that, the most important thing to look at today is not where maize is originating from, because those are market forces. If we start saying that this is where maize is originating from, we are importing maize because farmers are hoarding maize, we'll be losing the point. The most important thing is we are talking about the Kenyan economy. You know, if we situate ourselves in this position where we import, what are we doing? We are building, you know, we are building other economies by supplying our money, you know, to a supply chain that is big on another country and not ours. So farmers, on the one hand, are right in saying that this government came to power and say that you're not going to subsidize consumption, you're going to subsidize production. But you see, the maize that is being harvested now is not the maize that was produced, you know, at the time the president was making this statement. This is maize that was essentially in the farms way before the elections, you see. So there is that thin line between, is it the maize that was subsidized for it to be, you know, given to the market at a certain price that the government feels is correct, or is it the maize that the farmers invested so much in and they ought to be paid? My thinking is this is maize that farmers probably invested a lot in, and instead of threatening farmers and telling farmers that we will import maize, we have to be very diplomatic, you know, because if you import maize, essentially what we are doing is we are taking money outside, we are creating bigger value chains in other countries. If we find a way of diplomatically addressing these issues with farmers, we will have two things. One, we will have subsidy at the production level. And then number two, the cost will be affordable for Kenyans, but it is our farmers who will have money. When that money is circulating in our economy, that is the essence of helping the public afford the basic commodities that are in the market. But if we take that money outside this country in the name of importing, I think one, our farmers will suffer, and then number two, the cost will not come down. Walk along the shelves of these supermarkets in town, and what you realize is that there is maize, there is unga. The only thing is people can't afford it. And you see, when you have these conversations around importation, then you're making affordability a mirage for many Kenyans.
Now, Ishmael, big statement. The moment nikiinua mkono juu nikiweka chini, price ya unga itakuwa imeshuka. How then does the government make sure that there's delicate balance on Kenyans are provided for with maize, there is food on the table, the farmers are happy, and at the same time, that if you're not willing to sell, we will import?
Yeah, I think Dismas should have answered that question. He seems to understand the balance between the government's actions and the surplus we have with farmers.
It's just basic economics. It's basic economics, supply and demand.
Now, Aseto, when I just heard my colleagues discussing, especially the aspect that it does not matter where maize comes from as long as people have unga in their houses. But if you look at the bigger picture, actually, we should not import maize unnecessarily. That's my position. Number two, where are we importing from? We are importing from Zambia. We are importing from Mozambique, from Tanzania. So what is the kind of food regime or agricultural policies in those countries that we cannot implement here? Because you can't tell me that the soil in Tanzania is so good and the soil in Kenya is not good enough. I think Kenyan farmers are able to produce their own maize, at least in terms of planting maize and harvesting it, they are able. In terms of what the good minister is saying, that, you cannot force the government to buy, let's be realistic. Let Kenya be for Kenya. Let us have, the government, the State House executive really concerned about Kenyans. If it's just the issue of price, that is something which can be managed and can be handled. But it is good we produce surplus maize from our, fields, and it is important we sell, if necessary, to anybody, of course, but also to the government, because the government needs to keep a surplus. Those of us who are in the villages, we never knew what is a supermarket. We could plant maize, eat at home, and we are good to go. But for people like Dismas and Owila who have to go to the supermarket every day, I think it's important they appreciate that.
Mine comes from Sumis.
Local farmers should actually be supported. This should not be, gainsaid. We must support local farmers. We must support Kenya. And whatever is the surplus then can be sold out. We should be able actually to be exporting rather than bringing it in. But in terms of whether we should, you can't have a home and you say, hey, you guys, if you don't listen to me, I will walk all over here and I will do what I want to do. That is not fair to the Kenyans. The Kenyan farmers should be able to sell their produce to NCPD, and their produce, the only thing we should discuss is at what price.
I'd come back to you, Dismas. Now, here's a situation where Kenyans have to eat, right? The government has an agricultural ministry. We have Galana Kulalu. The government can't decide to go and plant its own maize. Why is it that the government is not looking and venturing into agriculture, planting its own food to feed its own people?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question, but let me buttress my earlier position. When you're talking about food security, there are essentially two key stakeholders. There is the consumer, who wants food which is affordable and available. In good part, the consumer doesn't care where the food is coming from. Whether it's coming from China, from Brazil, from India, they do not care where the food is coming from. All they want to do is to ensure that the food is affordable and available. Then there is the Kenyan farmer who is producing maize. And the Kenyan farmer wants to be paid top dollar for their maize because they've invested a lot of resources. And I think the elephant in the room here is the cost of production in Kenya. What is the cost of producing maize in Kenya? And that's what the administration is supposed to address, the cost of producing food in Kenya. If they're able to address the cost of producing food in Kenya, then we'll make a lot of progress. And how do you address the cost of producing food in Kenya? You look at the inputs. There is the fertilizer, there is the cost of energy, and all those kind of things. And the Kenya administration, if the Kenya Kwanza administration in the manifesto, they have said they're going to address the cost of production. Now, on your second question about the government going into farming, in my view, that is not a best practice. It's unacceptable. Most people say that the government has no business doing business. So all they need to do is to create that environment for the private sector to thrive. So that if Ishmael Nyaribo comes from Nyamira wants to go in maize farming, he can go and engage maize farming. So for them, the only thing they must do is to create an environment. But again, going to what Nyaribo has indicated earlier on, he seems to forget that there is a globalization. The world has become a global village, and countries which are making progress, they're taking over comparative advantages or competitive advantages. Because if he says that Kenya needs to produce maize so that we sell out the surplus, if he doesn't want to buy a surplus from other nations, then who is going to buy our surplus? So in my view, Kenya needs to look at what is that we can produce at the cheapest cost and flood the entire market. That does not mean that the authorities are not supposed to look at the Kenyan farmer and address their primary concern. But if the cost of production in Kenya is perennially way higher, we cannot say that the Kenyan consumer cannot enjoy the benefits of globalization.
Dennis, before it's a very good really issue, but if you look at our country, what policies do we have that we follow before there is a crisis? I mean, we are talking about maize, but if you contrast with what happens in the coffee industry, pyrethrum, you look at tea, you look at other sectors, what policy is there that then at least ensures that if we produce good tea in this country, we can process it right here in Kenya and then sell it out. So even the little one where we are so good, we still give it up to India, give it up to Britain so that they process and then send it back to Tanzania for sale. So my concern is the policy, and policy should protect the Kenyan, the indigenous person. That has happened in China, that has happened in India, we've seen it in Russia. So we get a lot of wheat being planted in where this Russia, Ukraine, and also in Russia they do a lot of this farming. It's happening in China. So the problem here is when people go to office, they get so busy insulting others. I mean, they get so busy enjoying whatever they are enjoying, but they don't go down to really honestly come together and they say, where are we taking the nation? So that they say, okay, in terms of security, this must be the policy. In terms of agriculture, this must be. And the policy, in my humble view, should not just focus on the truth or factual element that it is global. The global semantics should go around, how do we help the local man? How do we help the Kenyan? I don't think that is happening, and that's why you sometimes have floods actually flooding Kenya, and then all of a sudden there is drought, and then animals are dying. So I don't think anybody sits in the cabinet to make a policy and implement it in such a manner that it is a benefit for Kenya, actually?
Actually, he raises a very fundamental point. When you talk about Ukraine, Ukraine has been in a war situation for almost a year. And it's interesting that Ukraine is the country which is supplying with to the rest of the world. They even had a conference yesterday where they're supplying food to about 30 countries. And this is a country which has been in a war situation. Now, the Kenya Kwanza administration, using their plan, has got a very unique opportunity to ensure that they lower the cost of production in everything. We start by lowering the cost of energy. We start by the cost of bureaucracy, everything else. So that by the time President Ruto is celebrating his 1 year in office, he's got a very good scorecard to present to the nation.
But energy is increasing next week.
Husband, the bone of contention here is then the communication aspect that comes from this government and is going down to the people out there. When a cabinet secretary wakes up and say, but the mere fact that you live in Kenya, you're a candidate for death, we can as well add GMO, comes back and threatens farmers that, yo, if you don't sell us, we will import. In terms of communication that is packaged to make sense to that farmer, to make sense to that Kenya, is Kuria failure?
Well, I think, some of these guys are new in these positions. You move from a legislator who represents the interest of people and oversighting the executive to a situation where you are part of the executive. So it's basically an area that they are working on. And, since he made that declaration that GMO could be one way to your death, I think we've seen some sort of diplomatic speak in the way he approaches issues. But, there are things that are ingrained in someone's demeanor. And my understanding of the entire situation, communication climate within which Moses Kuria was speaking, it's not an ultimatum the way you should look at an ultimatum, but that is the way he basically addresses issues, But the point he's making is very critical, that where we are, the government is probably between, a rock and a hard place, because if prices keep going up because farmers are not releasing the maize, again, it will be the government looking back. Now, if they threaten farmers, again, it is majority of these farmers in Rift Valley who voted for the same government. But in reality, the truth is, if they release this, they would be making a big statement in terms of helping the entire country address the whole issue of the price of unga. But from a communication perspective, I think, based on what Moses Kuria said as a cabinet secretary, there is need for the people around him to start working on how does he address himself, what is the context of communication, what are the implications of what he's going to say, in a very clear pathway that would tell them, these are the kind of reactions we're likely to get, this is how we can mitigate it, this is what will come out, this is going to be dangerous in terms of mitigating the perception that we have, don't say it like this. So that they have to work with. But let me just come back to the issue of policy. We live in a global village.
Yeah.
And we can't say that because we are importing from other countries, we will not have an opportunity to export if we mass produce. If you look at the manifesto of both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, they were very big on factors of production, of enabling production. Even if the cost of power is high, even if we're importing from all over the world, it is incumbent upon the government of the day to ensure that producers in this country reap from what they're producing. That is one. And then number two, to ensure that whatever they are producing is competitive. And that tells you, one, they have to find a way of incentivizing farmers. And they talked about subsidizing production. Now, subsidizing production does not necessarily mean that the cost of power has to go down, that the cost of the input has to go down. It simply means that if the government can shoulder that to ensure that it is our producers who are supplying the market with products, so much so that if the cost of that product is going up, it is benefiting our producers, we'll be building an economy. Because then, if you resort to not incentivizing these farmers at the production level and say, let the global forces, market forces play into our economy, then it means these farmers will not be able to compete with cheap maize from everywhere. And we know, we live in a country where some of these things that are supposed to be domiciled within the Ministry of Agriculture are now conversations in the Ministry of Trade. It has nothing to do with just what the government wants to do. It has a lot to do with businessmen. People want to take advantage and supply cheap maize to interfere with the market. And I think it is incumbent upon the government to be very, very creative in how they handle this issue. So much so that our farmers have an incentive of producing into the market. That is one. And then number two, whatever comes into the market is affordable to Kenyans. And I want to disagree with Dismas. There is no way we are going to depend on just farmers. You know, there is a lot of government land that is lying idle. We can mechanize that land, because what you're looking for is food security. It doesn't matter who produces it. If the government can produce it a lot more efficiently and have food reserve for Kenyans, and mitigate the influence of traders who want to come into the market, supply cheap products by building other economies, so be it. And I think that is what agile governments should do. Come in and do that which is right.
All right, on that level. This was the thing. Let's take this short commercial break. When you come back, you get to respond to what husband has said, right?
Yes.
We'll be back in if you don't go anywhere.